All I can do is judge him on what he does. And thus far, I see a guy who does not seem to have the coherence or the strategy that he tried to convince Canadians that he would have when he asked to be Prime Minister of this country.
Welcome back to Northern Perspective, everybody. We have a very special episode today. We've actually been trying to get this person on since he was elected in the by-election for Durham a couple of years ago, and we are thrilled to have him on now. He is a force within the Conservative movement and on a mission to restore the North. Ladies and gentlemen, Jamil Jivani, welcome to Northern Perspective.
Hey, great to be with you, Ryan. Thanks, man.
So, a lot of people know who you are. You've been all over this country. You've been all over this continent. Before we get into some of the, really core questions I have, how did you get involved in politics in the first place?
Well, a lot of it was just being frustrated with what was happening in politics, like looking at it from the outside and being like, sometimes it feels like this is, the country's not being run by people who actually care about the people who live here. And when the opportunity came to get more involved through the media, that's where I started. So I started writing a column for the National Post and the Toronto Sun about political issues. And then my MP, Aaron O'Toole at the time, stepped down. An opportunity opened up for the by-election, and I just kind of jumped in and figured I'd give it a try. It was a good time in my life to try something new because I spent a lot of time kind of praying and had gone through this program with the think tank Carney, which encourages Christians in different walks of life to think about how we apply our faith in our respective professions. And I just felt a calling to give this a try and see if I could make a difference and try to do this in a different way. I feel like there's a certain playbook that people use in politics. There's things you're supposed to do and ways you're supposed to speak and issues you're supposed to focus on and things you're supposed to run away from. And I just said, I want to do something different. I want to do what I think people genuinely want. I want to represent people with some authenticity, to be myself, and to fight to be a normal guy in an abnormal environment. So that's what I set out to do, and it's been a couple of years now. I'm still kind of getting the hang of some things of it, but I feel good about what we've been able to do in our local community in Bowmanville, Oshawa North. Obviously, I want the Conservative Party of Canada to be governing. We've got some unfinished work to do in terms of achieving that, but it's been a lot in the last couple of years, that's for sure.
Given that you're bringing that approach into what you do and into the House, and then you run into a lot of the rules that are in the House of Commons, was that jarring for you when you first encountered that, or did you just accept that and roll with the punches?
Well, the rules, it's a good question, because the rules in the House of Commons I don't really find to be much of a problem. It's more so the unwritten rules that I find frustrating. So for example, there are times where, if you get passionate because you really believe in what you're saying and you have actual principles and values that you came to Ottawa to fight for, and then people look at you like you've got three heads, and it's like, oh, okay, like I thought we were here because we believed in something. And what's happened over the last couple of years, especially since Prime Minister Carney came along, and with these floor crossings and all this kind of stuff, it's sort of exposing, I think, to the people how few politicians, especially in the Liberal Party, believe in anything. They will go from telling you need a carbon tax to saying you don't need it, or they will go from telling you that the United States is our enemy and we need to work with China to groveling, for a trade deal. Like, they'll just change at a heartbeat, and that's the hard stuff to get used to. The rules are one thing. I think, I'm a lawyer by training. I can work within rules. What's hard is the idea that it's almost like some of these people look at you like you're silly because you care. And that's a hard thing to get used to. And Lord willing, I'll never get used to it. I don't want to feel comfortable there. I want to feel like I'm there to fight. And if things are not good and things are not right, I want to feel like my job is to confront it, not to be comfortable around it.
And one of the, I think, recent examples of maybe railing against some of these unwritten rules, I recall we did a video called 8 Hours of Injustice. And that was when the Justice Committee was meeting on C9. It was before Christmas in 2025. And I remember you had actually called out the Bloc member that was there. And they didn't like that. And the rule was, well, you can't call individual members a hypocrite. And then Philip Lawrence said, well, I would like to call the party the Bloc Québécois a bunch of hypocrites. So for those that were watching, what was that like being in that environment? There's so many Conservatives MP that were in support of taking out a lot of the problematic parts of C9 that you stretched around the table to the Liberal side. What was that like being in that room and just seeing what was going on in that atmosphere?
Yeah, that day I remember very vividly because we had done a campus event at Queen's University. So we drove from Ottawa to Kingston, then back to Ottawa. And we found out that the committee was still meeting. So I was like, okay, this is an important issue, Bill C9. The Liberals had been attacking the Bible. They had clearly said they find books of the Bible to be hateful. They are showing anti-Christian bigotry in their comments. And I wanted to show up and argue that point, that you're presenting this as if you're trying to stop what they are calling hate crimes, but in doing so, you're vilifying the faith that the majority of Canadians either are part of or their parents are part of, right? So I wanted to go. So I show up and, I add my name to the speakers list per the rules. And they try to take this issue where clearly they are the ones who are being attacking people. They're attacking a religion. They're attacking believers of a religion. They're attacking scripture and looking for ways to flip it on us so that they don't have to explain themselves and somehow we have to be defensive. So the Bloc Québécois and the Liberals are working together on this, whole committee so they could push through their horrible legislation. And I called it out. I was like, look, the Bloc Québécois is supposed to be the party that says to their people in Quebec, their voters in Quebec, they say they want to limit the power of the federal government. And that they come to Ottawa and ask the federal government to have more power over our speech. I'm sorry, that hypocrisy is too much. Sometimes you just got to call it out. And so I did. And then they want to play the victim, oh, you hurt my feelings. You call me a hypocrite. It's dude, you guys are trying to restrict our speech. You're trying to change the way the criminal code works in Canada. You're trying to limit religious freedom in this country. And yet you want me to feel sorry for you because I use the word hypocrite? Well, poor you, buddy. That's my feeling. It's what are we doing here? So, but that's gives you a window into how it all works. These guys will sit around in Ottawa, the Liberals, the Bloc, a lot of people, they sit there and they just go we're going to attack all the things about this country that you love, but the minute you say a word we find offensive, we're going to clutch our pearls and act offended. And that's what they did at that committee. So the Liberal chair of the committee winds up, kicking me off the speakers list, won't let me complete my comments. And I didn't get upset with him because, that's how these political guys work. They're always trying to stop people from being able to make their points. So I didn't take it personally, but I just thought it was a good, sample of what we deal with, that, these guys are less offended by taking the rights away from other Canadian citizens than they are by the word hypocrite. Okay, cool. If that's how you want to do politics, that's exactly why I'm not a member of your party and why I never would be, because I don't want to do politics that way.
Well, and you talk about this whole hypocrisy, and you mentioned this about this anti-American sentiment that's been, and I think it's really unfortunate because I don't think there's a reasonable person in Canada that can look at what Donald Trump is doing in terms of slapping all of these tariffs on Canada and saying, "Yay, I'm for all of these tariffs on Canadian industry and putting people out of jobs." I don't think any reasonable person can be in support of that. But the problem is what it's doing between just people that live on both sides of the border. We shouldn't be demonizing, the Americans that are just trying to make their way just like Canadians are. And what I've said and what a lot of people have said is, these are our brothers and sisters down there that we've fought with, bled with, and died with over the last 100 years. And, we can't be throwing away relationships like that. Donald Trump he's here, he's going to be gone at some point. But the United States and those businesses and those relationships will always be there to stay. So what does it say to you that the Liberals ran on this full-on anti-American platform, both on Mark Carney's leadership and the federal campaign, and then he's in the New York club saying that, Canada Strong will make America great again, literally using Donald Trump's slogan, and now they are trying to convince Canadians, well, we need the Americans, when it's like the Davos speech never happened.
Yeah, look, I think it reveals a couple things. Like, number one, I hope Canadians see it as an affirmation of why it's difficult to trust liberals, because they will speak out of both sides of their mouth. You will not actually know what they believe, because really they will believe whatever it takes for them to control the country and to seize power over our institutions. So I don't think that is an organization, the Liberal Party of Canada, that has principles or real values that it holds above its own power. Their power is all they really care about. I think that's one important point. The other thing that's important to note, though, is that they have no regard for the damage that their political agenda might have over others. When we're seeing layoffs and businesses in duress, and we see people who are feeling incredible anxiety over the potential for tariffs to get worse, or for the long-term economic consequences of the uncertainty and the lack of investment. These are real things that affect people. They affect workers and business owners and entrepreneurs. And, you look at it, and they were willing to play games with all those people's jobs, all those people's livelihoods, so long as it was politically beneficial to them. And I think they exploited the broken relationship between Canada and the United States. They exploited the tension that people felt and the offense that many Canadians took to the comments made by the president. And Liberals exploited that for their own political benefit. And that is something we shouldn't forget. They exploited things during the COVID era too, right? Turning people against each other, making people hateful toward one another, people within the same families, within the same households. Like, this is a party that has a track record of really being divisive when it is politically advantageous, but then very shrewdly being able to convince its opponents that they are the ones who are being divisive. And as a conservative, this is always something I'm very conscious of, which is, do not allow the people who want to defeat you and prevent people like you from having a voice in this country to define who you are. And I think on our side of the political spectrum, we make that mistake far too often. For years and years, people who are conservatives were afraid to confront the immigration issue because liberals would call us racist. We were afraid to tell the truth about how mandates were hurting children in school and lockdowns were hurting children in school, because we were afraid that they were going to say we were anti-science or anti-vaxxers. We were afraid to tell the truth in some cases, not in my case and a lot of other MPs, but there were certainly people, including maybe some of our provincial cousins here in Ontario, afraid to tell the truth about how the anti-American stuff was hurting our economy because they were afraid of being called too pro-American or too pro-Trump. And when you make decisions out of fear of what the liberals are going to say about you, it almost always leads you in a bad direction. And I think that's what I hope one of our big takeaways is do not assume sincerity on the part of your liberal critics, because I think we've got a lot of evidence now they're not sincere, no matter what names they call you.
And when it comes to Mark Carney, do you think that he is, and you kind of alluded to it, but do you think that he's specifically using the rhetoric from Donald Trump that does anger Canadians, justifiably, as a way to maintain support? Because that seems to be the only metric in which Canadians still have confidence in him, based on a recent Abacus poll, is that he's the guy to deal with, Donald Trump. So it seems that whenever Mark Carney's polls start to slip a little bit, all of a sudden we have this anti-American sentiment come up, and he whips everybody up into a fury based on fear-mongering and that sort of thing. Donald Trump doesn't help himself by some of the comments that he makes, but it's the utilization, to your point, of those comments by the Liberals to maintain power.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a real incoherence to Mark Carney's strategy with the United States. One month he'll say it's important to work on the relationship. The next month he'll insult the United States. I mean, it's not been clear exactly what he's trying to do. So I understand why people would view it and say, like, is this about a political, strategy as opposed to an economic strategy? Because it certainly looks that way. So I think that's a fair observation you're making in terms of what does he actually want to achieve here, and is the reason he's pursuing negotiations right now in good faith. I think people have naturally are going to have questions about that. We're in the middle of these negotiations now, and I just hope that we get some progress, some real progress. Like, I've been trying very hard to keep lines of communication open between the two countries. I've gone down to Washington a couple of times this year. I am sincerely of the view that, like, it is in the best interest of our workers and businesses for us to have a productive relationship with the United States. I hope Mark Carney gets there. Whatever the reason is, right, why he gets there, I just hope he gets there. And what really alarms me is when I see him utilizing the tensions with the United States to normalize doing more with China. Because I look at that and say, before this whole thing started, I think a lot of Canadians would have been very much on guard about China getting more influence over Canada. And now, because of anxiety over the United States, I see the Prime Minister trying to push China more into our institutions, more into our economy. That's a big problem too. So I can't speak to what his motivations are. All I can do is judge him on what he does. And thus far, I see a guy who does not seem to have the coherence or the strategy that he tried to convince Canadians that he would have when he asked to be Prime Minister of this country.
Well, especially because tariffs have increased since last October. More businesses have made permanent decisions based off of the economic climate of the last 12 months. And there's going to be shops that will be closing their doors forever and moving to the United States or other countries because of this inaction from the Liberals. The United States isn't blameless in this as well, folks. That's a different conversation. But, Mark Carney keeps saying we can only control what we can control. Well, the only political party we can control in this country is who's governing it, which is the Liberals, which is where we comment on. So where do you think this ends? Because Donald Trump has had a history of making an agreement with a country and then saying he's not going to put tariffs on it, and then does. We had that recent example with Japan. Based on the conversations that you've had, and I'm not going to ask you to reveal private conversations, but is there a shot that whatever agreement that we come to with the president, that it's going to stick this time with Canada?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think it all comes down to relationship management. Like a lot of things in politics and in governance and in foreign affairs, relationships matter. I hope that the Prime Minister acknowledges in the course of these current negotiations that the relationship management here has got to be a priority long term, short term, and medium term, all terms, right? And so I think if we repair this relationship that has been fractured, we can be in a position where, both in terms of trade but also in terms of security, the two countries are able to work together well. I really believe that's possible. We just have to want it. And I think it's important for us to, as you said, focus on what we can control and to put our best foot forward. So regardless of the outcomes of the current negotiations, that doesn't change. We still need to do quality, constructive relationship management with the United States, like we do with all of our large and important trading partners and security partners. And we cannot let the politics of the day blind us to what is in our best interests. So that's what I hope our takeaway is as a country. I would hope that all members of parliament, that the governing party, the opposition parties, provincial governments, premiers, that everybody can all agree on that point, that this relationship is important and we need to not put politics in front of it. So I think if that's the case, I'm confident we can get some really constructive things done over the course of time. But that is something we have to want to do. And to the people of the country, regardless of who you voted for last year or who you might vote for next time, I think we all need to expect our elected officials, expect the leaders in this country to prioritize rational decision-making, good relationships that are good for our workers and good for our businesses. We have to hold everyone to that standard, including me. Hold me to that standard too, please.
So Kate Harrison was recently on CBC, and she talked about the lack of transparency from Prime Minister Carney. Juxtapose that against the negotiations that occurred under President or Prime Minister Trudeau, where opposition and border MPs were actually involved in conversations when they were negotiating with Donald Trump back then. That hasn't happened this time around, but from everything that we've heard, Conservatives are prepared and will remain being prepared to help out in these talks to get a deal as much as they can. Is that fair?
Yeah, I think the leader of the opposition, Pierre Poilievre, is sincere when he has extended an olive branch to Prime Minister Carney about wanting all the parties to work together on this. I think Pierre is sincere about that. I believe that. And I do think that even if you look at sort of how committees have worked, if you look at how Parliament itself has worked, Prime Minister Carney has a bit of a track record of not loving transparency, not wanting to answer questions, and at his worst, behaving like he's above it all, that he looks down on people who think that he owes explanations and answers to the public. Even sometimes you can see that in his sniping back and forth with journalists. Ironically enough, despite how nice they are, he's still to him. He still can be quite, rude in response. So I think you're correct to observe that he's not been really open. And Kate Harrison on CBC made, I think, an accurate observation. He's going to have to be open about this should he want to sign this deal. The specifics he's going to have to be open about with the public. So he will have to answer those questions at some point. It is unfortunate, in my view, that Parliament is not in session right now.
This is a crisis of our lifetime, he told us.
Yeah.
Why are we not in Parliament?
And I will tell you, and I think that many Conservative MPs agree with me on this, we would be very happy to go back to Ottawa anytime he wants to have this conversation, to debate this in the House, to debate this at committee, to really show the Canadian public what is happening here. But we are not scheduled to reopen until September 20th. So we're in a position now where he gets to do a lot of this and decide unilaterally what kind of transparency he offers the Canadian people. I hope the media in this country works very hard to get answers to everyone's questions as soon as possible.
We all hope that as well.
I'm not holding my breath, but I am hoping.
Now let's talk about something else. This has been a passion of yours. What is Restore the North? Where did it come from? And for those that may not be familiar with it, what is it?
Yeah, so it's a play off of the Raptors slogan during their championship run, We the North, yeah. And the idea is, we believe that the country is in decline and that young people in Canada are being offered less opportunity to have a successful life in this country than past generations. And we want to restore that promise, that hard work bears fruit. So we called it Restore the North to draw attention to the fact that young people have to get involved in politics if they want to bring that promise of Canada back to life. We really believe that young people need to be, mobilized, they need to have their voices heard, they need to vote, they need to run for office, they need to be part of the political system. And we started to worry that because things were not getting better, under Liberal rule, a lot of young people might start to be discouraged. And this especially worried me after Charlie Kirk was killed last year, because I was really worried that so many young Canadians had watched him on YouTube, and he was such a big part of their own, let's say, media diet, that it could have a chilling effect on the participation of young people in our country. So as we started the movement as a focus on the unique challenges facing young men in our country, we started to hear from all these folks on university campuses saying they wanted to do kind of Charlie Kirk style town halls where young people got to speak their mind and share what they care about. So we started to travel around and give them the opportunity, and we'd film it and put it on YouTube so people could hear directly from young people what's on their mind, what are their priorities. And it grew and it grew, and it's been one of the highlights of my life. Like, I've really enjoyed it. I met so many great young people, and I have felt like we've been able to bring a lot of priorities of younger people to the forefront. So we're going to continue doing that. We're going to be not just visiting university campuses, but also churches, places of worship, anywhere we get invited to where young people want to have a conversation, we're going to go. And I really hope that one of the things that we really stress at these events that I'm confident will kind of get through to people is we do not go there to tell people who they should vote for. We go there to tell them they should vote and get engaged. And I'm confident enough as a Conservative that if young people think about what's in their best interest, they will conclude that our policies are the best for them. But that's not the most important thing to me. The most important thing is that their generation has a seat at the table. And right now, that's not what's happening in this country. The decisions are not being made in Ottawa about the future. they're being made by short-sighted politicians and bureaucrats who only think about how to keep their jobs and their power for the next 4 years. We need a culture where we're thinking 10, 20, 30 years down the line. We don't have that right now, but I think young people can help us get there.
And for Canadians that may be feeling, despondent, they may be feeling, a lack of morale and thinking, you know what, everything is still getting worse and we're not going to have an election for a while. What would you say to them in terms of, what's the reason to be hopeful and how can they counteract that and get involved?
Yeah, look, I understand why people feel frustrated. I understand why people might feel hopeless at times. My belief is, we have to bet on ourselves. We have to bet on the people of this country. This country's been exceptional for a long time, and it's been an incredible place for people from all around the world to come and make a life. And it's been a place where people could become things they never imagined. They could achieve things they never imagined. And I think when I say I think it's worth fighting for the future of this country, it's betting on our people. And it's saying that, we can do things that are incredible. We have done things that are incredible. And even when it seems like the odds are against us, I think that's a reason to say, God has done special things in this land before, and he can continue to do special things in this land. We got to work hard and do our best. That's how I think about it. I don't pretend that it's easy. I know there are many days where I feel like I'm swimming against the current between the media and the Liberals and the government, and here in Ontario, the provincial government. And it just feels like every major institution, the courts, like everybody's just like trying to row in this one direction. And as a conservative who believes in something, it often feels like we are pushing in the opposite direction. And I think to myself, well, how can we pull this off? We got so many things going against us. And I just say to myself, believe in the people, bet on the people. I believe that our message about things like affordability, limited and responsible immigration, tough on crime, national identity, pushing back on the woke stuff, pushing back on DEI, taking a stand for religious freedom and freedom of speech. These are things that I believe most people in this country believe in. They're on our side. I believe it. And it's up to us to sell them on a vision for how we make those things real.